support Congressman Lee Zeldin as the nominee to be the administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency. We are blessed in America with enormous natural resources. I support using our resources responsibly. I support sensible environmental stewardship, and that's what we will have with Mr. Zeldin. Americans deserve clean water and clean air. They deserve good jobs and economic strength. Environmental protection and economic growth should go hand in hand. They are not mutually exclusive. As the head of the EPA, Lee will return the agency to its original mission of protecting America's air, water, and land without, as he puts it, suffocating the economy. Nearly 2 weeks ago, the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works held a hearing on Lee Zeldin, and as the former chairman of the committee, I was honored to introduce him. He's highly qualified, and his support is bipartisan. He's a lifelong public servant, and he's a seasoned lawyer and has a sharp legal mind. He has over 20 years of military service, currently serves as a lieutenant colonel in our U.S. Army Reserves. Lee also served 8 years in Congress, in the House of Representatives, as a representative from New York. And in that role, he worked to strengthen our economy as well as protect his district's unique ecosystem. He worked across party lines to accomplish his goals. For the last 4 years, the so-called experts at the Environmental Protection Agency went on a reckless regulatory rampage. They saddled American families and businesses with higher costs and with heavy-handed restrictions. They bowed to climate extremism while ignoring common sense. In 2024, the EPA introduced one of the most expensive regulations in American history. It's called the Electric Vehicle Mandate. The EV mandate was truly left-wing lunacy at its worst. According to the Competitive Enterprise Institute, the total cost of compliance is over $760 billion, with a B, billion dollars. To put this in perspective, the cost of this one regulation coming out of the Biden administration was equal to the entire price tag of 8 years of regulations under the presidency of Barack Obama. The EV mandate would also cost hundreds of thousands of jobs. Americans rejected the EV mandate and other costly climate policies this past November at the ballot box. President Trump has revoked the EV mandate on his first day in office. Here in the Senate, repealing the Biden EV subsidies is one of my top priorities. These subsidies alone are estimated to cost taxpayers more than $393 billion. Americans shouldn't have their taxpayer dollars pay for vehicles that most Americans don't want, can't afford, and actually don't work for them and their families. Americans shouldn't be dependent on communist China like we are today with electric vehicles. Lee Zeldin will continue President Trump's mission to roll back these punishing political regulations. The EPA does important work. It does that work in states and in local communities. Lee will be a fantastic partner to my home state of Wyoming. He's not going to impose one-size-fits-all mandates on Americans, consumers, and American businesses. Instead, he's going to cut red tape. We will see a new wave of creativity and innovation. Lee knows that innovation, not government intervention, is the best solution to lower prices, to grow the economy, and to protect our environment. Many Americans are confident that Lee will right the ship and restore the balance needed at the EPA. One of these organizations is the National Association of Clean Water Agencies. In a letter to the committee, the association said that Lee has, quote, shown a willingness to engage with a broad spectrum of stakeholders to address pressing issues. Lee also impressed our colleagues here in the Senate. That's why my Democrat colleague from Arizona said about Lee, he's a qualified candidate for this job. I share America's confidence in Lee. Through 3 hours of tough questions, Lee Zeldin provided quality answers, and he proved that he is well qualified. He showed he's committed to strong environmental protection and to energy production. He's the right nominee to lead the EPA, the Senate should confirm him quickly. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
President.
Senator from Rhode Island.
Mr. President, I am a friend of the distinguished senator from Wyoming, but on this matter, we disagree quite a lot. I think clearly everybody likes clean air and clean water. My opposition to Lee Zeldin is founded on where he's likely to be on a different issue, climate change. Climate change is coming at us. And the context for Lee Zeldin's nomination, I believe, is this. We went through a long period of science on climate change, starting with the early days of Dr. Hansen and NASA's work by Exxon and other big oil majors themselves, lots of work in universities and in U.S. and state government. And the science pretty well nailed it. They pretty much got it right. And they warned what was going to happen, and it began to happen, and it has continued to happen. And based on those warnings, we moved into phase 2, which was the political era of climate, where it was our job here in this building to listen to those warnings and figure out what the best and smartest thing was to do about them. The problem was that the fossil fuel industry got involved with Citizens United climate money in the hundreds of millions behind it, and they squelched that conversation. And as a result, Congress has failed to address the looming climate crisis, purely from fossil fuel-funded Republican opposition. That takes us now into era 3, the era of the forewarned but not prevented consequences. And the place in which those consequences are most saliently making themselves felt is in the homeowners insurance industry. Homeowners insurance is in crisis in this country and in near meltdown in various states and counties in this country because the risk that the insurers have to bear is now unpredictable to them. So what we are seeing is homeowners insurance prices skyrocketing. We are seeing homeowners insurance companies going bankrupt, leaving states, firing their longtime clients because they don't want to provide coverage in these danger areas, which includes coastal areas. Florida, as a result, is kind of first and worst in the home insurance meltdown, and wildfire adjacent areas second, which puts California and a lot of other western states very much in harm's way. Now, the problem with that is it doesn't just end with an insurance crisis. When you get a sufficient number of properties that cannot get affordable home insurance or cannot get home insurance at all, those properties become unmortgageable. And if you're a billionaire living in Palm Beach, you can find another billionaire to buy your property who can write a check. But if you're a real-life person, a plumber in Orlando living in a development who paid for their home with a mortgage, you're going to want to sell that home to somebody who can get a mortgage. And when your home can't be mortgaged any longer, that will crash its property values. In fact, if your homeowner's insurance goes from $4,000 to $16,000, a case we heard of, then that crashes your property values too, because a $16,000 carrying cost on a piece of property knocks its value way down. So not from the greenies, not from the environmental community, but from Freddie Mac, the mortgage giant, we heard the warning that an insurance crash turns into a mortgage crash, turns into a coastal property values crash, which is serious enough that it redoes 2008. We have another national recession. It is in that context that we need to understand that we need an EPA director, an EPA administrator, who will take climate change seriously, treat the science honestly, and stand up where necessary to the political pressure that will be coming from the White House, where we have a president who actually thinks it's a hoax, and from the huge fossil fuel forces that propelled him into office with enormous amounts of political money and who now think they own the place. The fossil fuel industry has done nothing but lie about this and use their power for evil. President Trump is completely mistaken and under the thumb of the fossil fuel industry, and against that will stand the EPA administrator, who has to be truthful and factual and support and defend our environment and our safety from climate change. In that context, I have nothing against Lee Zeldin personally, but the likelihood of him standing against that fossil fuel bulldozer that is coming at him is essentially zero. And that fossil fuel bulldozer is also going to be bulldozing their way into American homes in the form of an insurance crisis that is looming. So this is going to become very real, very fast, and in that context, this is very much the wrong guy. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
Majority Whip.
Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent the mandatory quorum call with respect to the Zeldin nomination be waived.